So I have a really interesting video for you today, as I'm going to show you something that very few people have ever seen or heard of before. At least not yet. In fact, I'm going to show you 4 photos that were sent to me of something that was recently discovered at a notable ancient Egyptian site, which for some reason is yet to be shared with the public or make the headlines. Now, the discovery in itself is fascinating, but the implications of not only what it is, but specifically where it is, may make your jaw drop. And of course, later in this video, I will be sharing the big, awkward reason why this hasn't been shared with the public or made the headlines. And trust me when I say that you're gonna find that reason disturbing. Now let me start off by sharing where these 4 photos were taken, which just so happens to be at a notable ancient Egyptian site known as the Dendara Complex. This site is known for a few highly recognizable features, including the massive stone columns that make up the Temple of Hathor, and also the incredibly interesting and of course highly debated hieroglyphs and petroglyphs found throughout this site. But what if there was something else here that was hidden from everyone? Egyptologists, archaeologists, researchers, something really big. And although you couldn't say that it was hiding in plain sight, but what if it was something right under our noses that nobody ever thought to go looking for? Now, what do I mean by under our noses? Well, like I mentioned a moment ago, this is the Temple of Hathor, famous for the incredibly large columns and impressive stonework that cover virtually every inch of every wall, column, and ceiling throughout the temple. In fact, there are dozens of columns, 24 in total between 2 hall rooms, all of which are 15 meters or nearly 50 feet tall, and the 24 does not include the outside columns that surround the temple. The decorative work is astounding and full of incredible symbolism, a trove of knowledge that was communicated and passed down by the ancient Egyptians thousands of years ago. Now, Hathor was mother of the sun god Ra and sky god Horus. Look at the face of Hathor, and the late Egyptologist John Anthony West described her interesting and unusual appearance as a form of symbolism. For example, her triangular face may have represented the shape of a uterus, essentially depicting her as the divine feminine. Also notice the ears. Those are certainly not human ears, and many, including John Anthony West, stated that they are cow ears. But why would those have been chosen? What symbolism are those meant to represent? Different people have different thoughts on this, but one thing is for sure. The appearance and shape of Hathor's face is much different than any depiction of any female's face depicted by the ancient Egyptians. And also notice how all of them are defaced. It is not known who did this, when, or for what reasons. But in many ways, this giant temple, which is literally a building made entirely of stone, could be considered a planetarium of sorts, that Hathor represents the cosmic mother, the mistress of time, astronomical cycles, and all cycles of time. And it's worth mentioning that this temple represents the time of the Old Kingdom, when Egypt was led by many priestesses and was a matriarch for a period of time as well, something few people seem to discuss, which I find interesting. Now, the ceiling itself ties into the astronomical cycles I just mentioned, and in many details. For example, what you see here is said to represent the waxing of the moon, which totals 28 days. So you see 14 gods and goddesses on 14 stairs, said to represent the 28 total days that make up the full and new moon cycles. Another example of the cosmos being represented in this temple includes what is referred to as the Dendera Zodiac, which the Egyptians likely took straight from the ancient Sumerians 6,000 years ago and made it their own. There are many other fascinating details about what is inscribed on the stone throughout this temple, but that is not what this video is about. However, I wanted to share with you the nature of this temple, that incredible intelligence went into not only constructing it, which in itself is impressive, but the thousands of years of learned knowledge that would have went into developing the information shared within the temple is simply incredible. But like I said at the beginning of this video, what if there was something else here? Something that was hidden from everyone and for thousands of years. And by the way, if you're not aware, I recently started an Instagram account a few months ago where I'm sharing more details about this channel, including clues about my upcoming videos. as well as I intend to share more information about my personal life so you can get to know me a bit better. But I was very fortunate that an awesome friend named Jamie reached out to me through Instagram, having recently returned home from a life-changing trip to visit ancient Egyptian sites back in April. She had an opportunity to see many things that others traveling in large tour groups normally do not, as she traveled with just a few people and hired an experienced Egyptian tour guide. A tour guide who had many insider connections with various guards and Egyptian officials, and was able to gain access to certain locked doors in exchange for, of course, cash money. So, while visiting the Temple of Hathor, Jamie was fortunate enough to see something that was recently uncovered on the floor of this very temple. Again, something that only a small number of people have seen or been made aware of. So, without further ado, this is what she was shown. What you're looking at here, which is seen with the removal of this large and very heavy floor stone, is not a round stone paver. In fact, it is the very top of a buried, upright stone column, which appears to be of not just one column, but multiple upright and buried columns, which is directly underneath the Temple of Hathor. That's right, directly beneath all of this is another temple full of columns. I do not know how many columns there are, how tall or wide they are, or how widespread the below temple is, but wow. Please leave a comment thanking Jamie for these outstanding photos, and give this video a thumbs up if you've never seen or heard of this discovery before. Let's get the word out. But really, you would expect to have heard about this discovery from, I don't know, multinational news outlets, the National Geographic, or maybe, just maybe, the Egyptian Antiquities Department, which of course oversees all of these sites. Now, take a look at this diagram, which shows you the specific location within the temple that has this missing floor stone and the multiple buried columns. But speaking of this missing floor stone, which was only removed in the first place in order to conduct restorations on it, which was apparently within just the last few months. And this is, of course, how they came to discover these columns in the first place. And by the way, is this actually multiple buried columns, or is this just one massive one with unique shape? I mean, real quick, compare to the shape of the columns that we do see inside this temple, and notice the similarity. I'm not exactly sure what to make of this, and I'm curious to know what your thoughts are in the comments. But the question becomes, how tall are these buried columns? How many are there? How big is the buried temple down below? And what is waiting to be discovered inside of it? So let's get this straight. The already incredible site of Hathor, which contains a wealth of information about our ancient past, just so happens to be sitting on top of a long-lost buried temple, and nobody knows what's waiting to be discovered in it, and the people running the show haven't made the public aware of it yet. So this is the part involving why you haven't heard about this fascinating and, by the way, significantly important discovery yet. The private guide informed Jamie that they will be covering it back up and will wait to excavate it once they can do so in secret. Those were his exact words. That's right. The guide himself said that they will conceal it and will be excavating it without the public's knowledge at an unknown time in the future, which I assume means that they'll wait until more broad restorations are required at the site when they can lock it down for extended periods of time. These photos literally prove that the authorities overseeing these ancient sites are actively preventing newfound information from reaching the masses. Think about that. This info isn't being shared with professors, archaeologists, Egyptologists, or researchers. The people with control over these sites have reason to do the things that they do on their own, in secret, before sharing whatever they decide to share with the public. Am I the only one that sees a major issue with this? And by the way, of all places that this buried temple happens to be at is a site where some of the most debated stone reliefs from anywhere in ancient times exists, such as that which is commonly referred to as the Dendera light bulb. Look at this thing and tell me it doesn't make your eyebrow go up. Now, I've done quite a bit of research on this and read and listened to many different perspectives, from both the mainstream academic explanation to those who suggest that this is evidence of ancient technology. Now, the academic perspective on this is that the lotus flower depicts the god Horus, emerging from the blooming flower at the beginning of the day, and the energy of Horus is represented by the snake. Now, that part about the snake supposedly depicting Horus would seem like a stretch, but also keep in mind that the stone facing this one shows Horus and the snake together, which is why they say the snake in this picture represents Horus, assuming you buy into that. Now, the bulb part of it is said to depict the sanctuary of the sun, or rather the birthplace of our sun, perhaps symbolism of our atmosphere that protects us. The supporting Jed pillars below are following the sky on its nightly journey, and the people below are said to be celebrating the new sun as it journeys across the new sky, essentially being born, which is why many believe this represents the story of creation. Now, I have a few thoughts of my own on this, and I must say that the explanations of that this is symbolic of essentially creation is actually highly compelling based on other examples of symbolism at Hathor's temple. I highly recommend you research this on your own and develop your own conclusions, but it seems to me that this is probably not a light bulb. But I also think that this may well represent great knowledge, and perhaps of the use of this knowledge in the form of energy. Hear me out, as there's a few details that many people who are convinced that this thing is strictly symbolic and has absolutely nothing to do with technology seem to overlook. Let's look to the right of this. The hieroglyphs themselves give warning, but the question is, warning to what? Now, look at this figure, which almost looks like the body of a baboon, except the tail is much different than that of a baboon. And the face seems to look like, I don't know, a toad or a frog of some kind. This is beyond unusual, and get this. This is literally the only place throughout anywhere in ancient Egypt that this being, whoever it is, has been found. This is the one and only example. Interesting, and I do like the points made by authors Brian Forrester and Stephen Mailer in the explanation of this, in that look at how it's holding two knives. Could this be symbolic that this knowledge could be used for good or bad? That it could be used to improve life or harm you? Because after all, that is certainly an accurate way of describing electricity. It can cook your dinner, heat your house, or electrocute you to death. It has to be mentioned that the depictions of snakes literally represent energy in most all ancient civilizations, including Kundalini energy. Now, I'm not saying that this necessarily depicts electricity at all, and again, I doubt that it's a light bulb, even though it surely looks like a light bulb, but whether it is or isn't, is it really that out of the realm of possibilities that we don't fully understand the meaning or the context of this? I mean, any honest and informed researcher would say yes to that, as even in modern times, you can't report on any story without people coming to totally different conclusions. But not only that, many people that identify with the mainstream academic narrative of its symbolism all seem to have differing nuanced versions of it. It's actually a bit inconsistent, which is odd for people claiming to know exactly what it is. Now, many see this and consider that the lotus flower seems to be connected by a cord to the box down below on the right. Guys, again, research this on your own. There are many logical explanations that have nothing to do with technology. But if there was one point I would make about all of this, besides that there is a warning given on the right of this depiction, which doesn't seem to belong there with the story and symbolism of creation. I mean, really, why is there a warning for this? Clearly, there's more to interpret in the details here that most seem to overlook. But I do have specific questions as to what's referred to as the Jed. The Jed is supposed to symbolize stability, but more specifically, it is said to represent the spinal cord of the god Osiris. Although I can understand it symbolizing stability in certain examples, there are other examples that tell me it's something far more specific. I mean, just look at this and tell me how you could conclude that this represents the god Osiris's spinal cord. Plus, if you look closely, it's almost like a two-pronged fork at the top. This is something very unique, and I question its true meaning in certain examples. And there are many other interesting depictions of this, but it's examples like this that suggest that we don't fully understand the meaning and context. And by the way, as far as stability goes, pillars and columns certainly provide stability, which is what this looks like. It looks like an oddly shaped pillar. But what's particularly interesting is that this is literally nothing like any other Egyptian-made column or pillar ever found. They just don't look like this at all. The Jed interpretation came from an Englishman named Wallace Budge 100 years ago, who is notable for translating the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Budge stated that originally Osiris was probably represented by the Djed alone and that he had no other form, just this pillar thing. He regards the Djed hieroglyph as a conventional representation of a part of his spinal column and gives its meaning as, quote, to be stable, to be permanent, abiding, established firmly, enduring. I have to say that I think that there's more to that story than just that. Leave a comment and share what your thoughts are on all of that, but one thing that I'm very curious about is this other highly unusual stone relief that is right next to this light bulb. I mean, just look at it. Those unique faces with the cow ears. What exactly is connected to their head? I mean, honestly, this is some weird stuff, and I sense that its true meaning goes far beyond the explanation that this half-circular thing at the bottom is a Manat necklace, which, well, yes, it is, but what is the meaning of this necklace? And what is its place in this particular stonework? Why is it connected to multiple strange-looking heads? Meaning and context are beyond significant, and here we are now, thousands of years later, trying to interpret what they were trying to tell us. So it's more than reasonable to say that we probably are mixing some accurate as well as some inaccurate information and coming to conclusions. I mean, my ultimate conclusion is that we don't ultimately fully understand the meaning of it. And it's foolish for anyone to say that they have it 100% figured out. What I know is that I don't know. But this is a fun conversation regardless of what you think it is, because here we are, we're discussing it, and it's not being forgotten. And as well, it's being brought to new eyes that have never seen or heard of this before. Which, by the way, I mean, this whole site in itself, the Dendara Complex and these incredibly interesting hieroglyphs, as well as the Temple of Hathor and those massive columns, most people have never even seen or heard of this stuff before, as it's simply not included in most curriculum for ancient studies. I mean, they teach you about the Sphinx and the pyramids and mummies and King Tut, right? But have you seen about this when you were in school? I mean, have you ever seen these things before? I know I wasn't taught about this stuff. But all of that said, here we are now with the knowledge that there is a completely hidden temple just waiting to be discovered at this very site. Who knows what is buried down there, or engraved on the stone walls within it? And for a site that is already so impressive and debatable, the fact that this recent discovery is being kept from the masses really makes you think. Again, a special thank you to my friend Jamie for sending me these outstanding photos, but you will all be thrilled to hear that there are other photos that she sent me that are behind closed and locked doors and gates at various Egyptian sites. And it is truly interesting what they don't want everyone to see on these tour groups. So look forward to an excellent video with those photos soon. So to close all this up, despite all the disagreements between various academic researchers or so-called fringe researchers, or even those that think that aliens built the pyramids, the one thing that we all have in common is the fact that we have all been left in the dark about this discovery. It's time that everyone that shares the unique passion for our ancient history to unite and come together and realize that, hey, we're not being fed the whole story. And if there's one thing that we all have in common, is that we want to know what the truth is, right? And without a doubt, all of us want to know what the story is of these buried columns. Why were they buried in the first place? And what is waiting to be seen down below? Anyways, guys, I'm going to wrap it up here, but leave a comment, let me know what your thoughts are on all of this. Hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't. And of course, follow me on Instagram if you haven't done that already. But I'll leave it there. Look forward to a great video coming soon. But yeah, I'm Jimmy. This is Bright Insight. Take care, everybody.